Shalom. In the Beit HaMikdash, on the second day of Pesach, we bring a special Korban called the Korban Haomer. This is a Korban, as we actually read about this past Shabbat, which is a form of Bikurim. It's the very, very beginning of the grain harvest. Or later on, the Torah calls it Reshit Kitzirchem, the very, very first barley that begins to ripen. They go out and they cut on the night of Motzai Yom Tov, the first beginning of Chol HaMoed, and the next morning they bring the Korban in the Beit HaMikdash. And this Korban Omer, which opens for us the season of being allowed to benefit from the produce of the new year, is also the beginning of Sefirat Omer. The Torah tells us, Usfartem lachem mimochorat Shabbat, miyom aviachem et Omer atnufa. From the day that you bring that Korban, you count 7 weeks, vikravtem mincha chadasha lashem. And that brings us to Chag Shavuot, and there also there's a mincha chadasha. There's also a special Korban called the Shtei HaLechem. The Korban Omer, which is brought on Pesach, is brought from barley, which ripens first, and it is matzah. And the Korban Shtei HaLechem, which is brought on Shavuot, is brought from wheat, which was considered to be a more developed and elaborate form of grain. And it's one of the only korbanot that has in it chametz. The Shtei HaLechem is brought as chametz. And what these two korbanot do, and the 7 weeks that are counted in between them, is they basically mark the beginning and the end of a natural process of maturation that happens in the fields in Eretz Yisrael every single spring, where the grain that just begins to become available at Chag HaMatzot, when we bring the Korban Omer, matures and becomes improved over the 7 weeks of Sefirat Omer until it reaches its full culmination at the time of the harvest, which is Shavuot. The Gemara tells us that something very interesting about Sefirat Omer. Although the Sefirah is rooted specifically in the Beit HaMikdash, and it counts from one Korban to another Korban, and therefore one might have thought that this is a completely national thing and that the count should be done by the Sanhedrin, by the Beit Din HaGadol, like is done, for example, in counting the years of the Yovel. The Gemara specifically tells us that it says, Usfartem lachem. Each individual has to count the Sefirah. In other words, it's a national process that counts from one Korban to another, but yet each individual has to count the Sefirah, relating that to his or her personal life. And if you go back to the farmer who's watching his crops mature over the day by day over these 7 weeks, what the farmer is doing is he's linking his own personal experience as he personally counts from the Korban Omer to the Korban Shtei HaLechem, and he reminds himself of the meta-historic national maturation that took place between Yetziat Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, and which we reenact and sort of relive every single year. The Gemara tells us something else that's also very interesting about Sefirat Omer. Since the count is really linked to the Korbanot in the Beit HaMikdash, at least according to the majority opinion of Rishonim, how the Gemara is understood, nowadays, in theory, we really shouldn't be counting Sefirat Omer. Unfortunately, we don't have these Korbanot to count from and to link with the Sefirah. And therefore, the Gemara says, and most Rishonim understand that this is a halachic statement, that Sefirat Omer is only midrabanan bisman hazeh. It's only a zecher lemikdash. In other words, Sefirat Omer nowadays, like the Pesach Seder itself, is lacking something fundamental. We have a Pesach Seder without the Korban Pesach, which is the fundamental element, the central piece of the whole thing. And Sefirat Omer also is sort of a reflection of something that is lacking. And therefore I think it's interesting that the days of Sefirat Omer, which in principle should be days of great rejoicing, became over various points in history times where there are practices of Avelut, commemorating various tragedies that took place specifically during this time. And perhaps that can be understood precisely as connecting with the Zecher LeMikdash, with the fact that the Sefirat Omer today is something that is unfortunately lacking its fundamental essence. At the same time, I think it's also fascinating and certainly not coincidental that in our tkufa, in our time period, in our generation, during our present Geula, the 2 days that we observe to commemorate fundamental milestones on the path to rebuilding the Mikdash, I'm referring, of course, to Yom HaAtzmaut and to Yom Yerushalayim, that these 2 days also fall out during the time of Sefirat Omer. This year particularly, we're going into Pesach with momentous, meta-historic events taking place around us, and we don't fully understand what's happening right now. It's just very, very clear. We're going through a difficult time on the one hand, a very difficult time, and simultaneously, incredible things are happening. Our enemies are being destroyed around us. Again, we don't understand exactly where this is leading in the short term, at least, but there is definitely a sense that major waves of Geula are taking place around us. And we can therefore go into Pesach this year with the hope, with the tikva, that this be the year that the Shtei HaLechem turns back into the full thing, and that the Sefirat Omer counts actually from one Korban to the other, and at the time of Avelut gives way to the full understanding and the full simcha that Sefirat Omer is supposed to be. May this be the year. Chag Sameach to all of you.